Oh, this is Mr. Poley. I'm back with the assignment for Tuesday, May 5th for applications of statistics. This is my round two because I recorded this once and realized I didn't have my microphone on. So that video had no audio and we had to scrap it. So round two, this one's going to be better than ever. Okay, so this assignment does follow the same setup as our previous two assignments. Those were the flatten the curve analysis and the pandemic spending model analysis. Both of those, I wanted you to go through the process of things you notice, things you wonder, and then a catchy headline that describes really the main idea of the graph or the model. And then from there, once you have a general understanding of the graph or the model and what it's really showing us, you had to follow that up with some critical thinking questions. And they are critical thinking questions, as you should spend a little more time on them. They may be a little more difficult to wrap your mind around what is actually being asked. How should I answer this? Okay, that's why they are critical thinking. It should take you a little longer. They're not meant to just be answers that come right out of your mind without thinking. Okay, so there is some time and effort that should be put into answering those. Okay, so each of these assignments does have two parts. The first part, again, is the notice, wonder, catchy headline. The second part is the critical thinking questions. Okay, and as always, I'm always available by video call to help you out anymore if you need that or want that help. So please reach out to me. Okay, there's no excuse not to have these done and not to have them completely done. So this next model here that's behind my face, we are taking a little step away from coronavirus model and analysis for now. And this graph is also related to a relatively hot topic the past at least few years, right? It's related to global warming. So you'll see this bold headline here says the global average temperature compared to the middle of the 20th century. And then if you read this little blurb over here, this says these are anomalies shown relative to the average temperature between 1951 and 1980. So this graph here is all based on their average temperature from 1951 to 1980. So this middle line here, which we're going to call the baseline, this is the average temperature, again, between those years, 1951 and 1980. That's what this refers to as the middle of the 20th century. So all the years from 1880, which is our most left year, all the way up to 2019, all of these years, their temperatures are being compared to that average temperature from the years 1951 to 1980. Okay, so that is this baseline. Normally, we're used to seeing the baseline of a graph at the bottom of the page, but here it's not, because there needs to be room for these bars to come down, and then more room for these to come up. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so the first thing I notice here, I'm going to go through that process again. I notice that there are blue bars that go down from the graph, kind of hang down from that baseline, and there are orange bars that rise up. They grow out of that baseline. Okay, I notice that 2019 is almost the highest bar on this graph. And I notice that right around 1905 is the lowest bar on this graph. Okay, I also notice that there's a huge chunk of blue to start this graph on the left side, and then there's a huge chunk of orange to finish this off on the right side. But in between here, there's a bit of a fluctuation. And again, this is just something I'm noticing here, so I'm not trying to imply anything or make any conclusions. These are just things that I notice. Right, so I notice it's all blue, then there's a few orange, then a few blue, then a couple orange, then a few blue, orange, blue, orange, blue, orange, blue until you get this huge chain of orange again. Okay, so again, just things I notice. I also notice that there's little increments, right? This goes up by 0.25 or a quarter of a degree. So 0.25, 0.5, 0.75, right? And again, that's the relative, it's all relative to that average baseline, 1951 to 1980. So at this point here, like this year right here, that would hit that plus 0.25, whatever that year was, it looks like it was maybe 1992. 1992 was on average a quarter of a degree Celsius warmer than that average temperature between 1951 and 1980. If we look up here, this year would be what, 2013? 2013 on average was 0.75 degrees, so 3/4 of a degree Celsius, warmer than the years between 1951 and 1980. On the other side of that, you see when we go down into the blue, we have those same increments, so negative 0.25. Now, negative 0.5 would probably be right around here, but there's not enough room to squeeze that in. So what that means, let's see, 1920 hits right here. So 1920 on average was 0.25, a quarter of a degree colder than that average temperature between 1951 and 1980. So just trying to help you understand how to read this graph here. Okay. So let's see, what else do I notice? I think I kind of covered some good noticings, but now what do I wonder? I wonder why there is so much fluctuation in the middle here, right? What was going on in those years to cause this up and down average temperature? Because now we're just looks like we're going up, up, up. I wonder, maybe is 2020 and maybe the next 10, 20 years, are those bars going to be up off the screen here? Are we getting that much warmer? And I wonder, maybe before 1880, if we had data to go back further, would these bars go down, down, down? So it's hard to tell from looking at these bars here how that would have trended before 1880. Okay, another thing I'm wondering, why did the makers of this graph, NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, why did they decide to make that average temperature between 1951 and 1980? Why did they choose to make that the baseline? You know, that's something I'm wondering. Okay, so again, up to you guys to point out things that you notice and things that you're wondering. And that should bring you to the catchy headline, right? Tie it all together to say what's going on in this graph, the main idea here. So my headline, of course, it'll be up to you to come up with your own, but my headline will be warmer or colder, how do we compare through the years? All right, that does a good job of capturing the overall idea of this graph. It's up to you to come up with a headline that's even catchier than that one. Okay? So again, after you go through that process, give it a solid effort to really notice things, wonder things, and come up with a headline. You then have a few critical thinking questions that you have to spend a good amount of time to develop your answers. And those we will discuss in more depth in our Zoom call on Tuesday. Okay, but before you do that, one of your critical thinking questions involves a second graph, which I did link into the assignment. That graph is over here. Okay, this is the second graph that you are asked to look at and make some comparisons between. So this has a very similar idea. It says rising global temperature, how much cooler or warmer every year was compared with the average temperature of the late 19th century. And over here we see it says hotter than the 1880 to 1899 average. That's above the line. And colder than that is below the line. So a very similar setup to that first graph we were looking at. But now here, instead of 1951 to 1980 as our baseline, we're looking further back in time. So the baseline comes from a time that was much longer ago. Okay, and now also the first graph was a type of bar graph. This graph is a type of dot plot where all the dots are connected to the next dot. So this graph maybe shows the temperatures being a little more sporadic, up and down, up and down. It just looks like a lot more is going on with all these individual dots as compared to the bars. But again, the idea is the same. Okay, so I just wanted to try to clear that up a little bit, explain this graph a little bit more. Now you should have everything you need for this graph. And again, if you need more help understanding this or thinking it through, please join my call tomorrow. But give it your best effort until then. Okay, you can do it. You've got high hopes, big expectations. Okay, that's all for now. Until next time.